Testing. Check 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Check 1. Yeah. You got enough of that?
Sounds
check
good.
1. Check 2.
Welcome to LifeWay Worship's worship webisode. We're so thrilled that you've come to join us today. Whatever you're involved in your church's worship music ministry, we just trust that LifeWayWorship.com and WorshipLife.com will become places that you'll come back to time and time again for ministry resources that help serve you as you serve churches and making disciples. Today we are thrilled to have one of the most successful, enduring, and best loved gospel music groups of all time, Selah. So glad to have you guys here.
Thank you.
And let me do the introductions right off the bat. We've got Amy Perry sitting down there. We've got Todd Smith in the middle and Allan Hall over here.
Hey, gang.
They are Selah. Now let me see if I can get some of these numbers right because they are overwhelming to me, the way God has used you guys in your ministry. So we're talking about almost 2 decades that Selah's been singing songs. We're talking about 8 #1 singles, including the one that we're going to talk about in just a minute, You Amaze Us. We're talking about 7 Dove Awards that you guys have won. We're talking about 5 Inspirational Albums of the Year, and over 4 million units between albums and singles that Selah has sold. The way God has blessed your ministry, the way He has multiplied your message, you must just be overwhelmed by how He's blessed you.
Wow, well, the way you laid it out there, I really am. We know it's a God thing because we never set out, we just made an independent project is how we started. It was made for Todd and his sister Nicole is our original female member.
Right.
For their parents' ministry, for their mission ministry. We put together a hymns album as a thank you, like to some, if someone donated, you know, they were just going to send these hymns that we had done. And you know, we were all in different stages of life. Like Todd you were actually leaving to go to William Tyndale, right?
Yeah, go back up to Detroit to go to Bible college.
Yeah,
Okay.
we had met at Belmont here in Nashville,
sure.
we worked a little bit together musically. But then Todd was actually leaving to go back to Detroit. I was in a job that I hated, just trying to make my way in the music industry.
Right.
And so when we did our album, it took 2 weeks, that little independent project, but that was like an oasis for me. Wow. And then Nicole had her own solo deal at Curb already.
Right.
So she was working on a solo project. So that's not the formula for putting together a group.
Right, sure.
When one's moving to Michigan, one has a solo deal. So we did this, and then the label head, Nicole, Mike Curb, heard it. Right. And said, hey, he said, I really love this. It's powerful. He said, I want to sign you guys as a group. Mm-hmm. Keep Nicole as a solo artist also. And so we... that blew my mind. That had been a prayer of mine. Yeah, I knew I wanted to help people through music from an early age. Right. And I didn't know how the exact form that would take. I got here to Nashville in '88. We signed our record contract in '98. Okay. So almost 10 years. Right. And that was for me, like God, a lot of pruning, right. A lot of discipline, a lot of waiting, right. A lot of yearning, a lot of tears. You know, we always tell anyone, a young person moving here to Nashville or wanting to build a music career, you've got to be able to handle a ton of rejection. Mm-hmm. You've got to be a ton of no's. You know, just right. You got to be ready to handle. But so all that to say, that's a long roundabout way of saying we saw when God just put it together because even after we recorded the album, and we were like, oh, this is fun. It's hymns. We love it, but we weren't like, let's sit down and have a strategy meeting to turn this into almost 20-year career right. And a trio. And so we know it's just been God's hand, and yeah, it is overwhelming. I'm just glad. I remember after the first album, I remember telling Todd, I hope this does well enough that we get to record a second album.
Sure.
And now here we are in number 9 or 10 or so, and that's been unbelievable to me.
Absolutely amazing. Todd, tell us from your perspective. You've been here for this long ride as well. How God has used you, what he maybe inspired in your heart at the beginning, and how He's translated that now into a message that's really speaking to the church.
Yeah, initially we were just kind of doing songs we loved, and so it wasn't. I grew up in Africa, right. And my sister Nicole, we were both missionary kids in Congo and lived there for 8 years. And then at our church in Franklin, Tennessee, which is right outside of Nashville, right. We just sing a lot of different worship songs. And as a kid, growing up in Congo, we would sing hymns. We'd gather together on Sunday nights. My mom would sit at the piano, right. And we would just pick one hymn out of the hymnal book, after another. And so when it came time to making the record, We were doing songs at his church, and we did a couple other concerts. We even did one for a youth group, and we sang It As Well. And 15-year-old kid, I think, he came up to Allan, he's like, man, It As Well song, that's amazing. Did you guys write that?
Not familiar with it.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, did you write that?
It's incredible how the young generation just doesn't know.
Yeah.
Right.
And some of these new hymns.
And I always had a burden for that even after we'd started. It was like, hymns are kind of vanishing from the
Right.
church. Or if a church does a hymn nowadays, it's somehow, they think it has to be pepped up in a certain way or added to.
Right.
And it's like, these are beautiful songs that stand on their own. So if we've had any small part in keeping, like, I love it at our concerts when college kids come to us or teenagers. I don't usually expect that maybe some younger folks are listening to us always.
Sure.
But when they do and they say, hey, I love these hymns, that's really dear to me, that hopefully we're keeping them alive for a whole new generation.
Yeah, you guys have become known for that. And then you add Amy's rich vocals to the group. What a wonderful addition. What did it feel like to come in and join this group? It's been in ministry for such a long time and just become so quickly such an integral part.
At first, I didn't even realize what I was joining. When I got the call to audition, I had never really heard of them. And so I thought, okay, well, I'll just give them my name and maybe this will be my shot at a record deal. I mean, it was really just very I was thinking of moving home, but I'll do this audition. And then I called my husband and I said, download some Selah music. And he was like, okay, and I said, we'll listen to it because I got this call from a friend who says they're looking for a new girl. And I walked in the front door and he was freaking out. And he was like, you're going to freak out when you hear these people. And I was like, really? And then he put on their Hiding Place CD and I was like,
wow.
After, I don't know, half a song, I was like, I need to be in this group. Everything
Wow.
changed in that moment that I heard. And it actually, I became obsessed with it. By the time, 2 or 3 weeks later, I actually had my audition, I had memorized most of that CD.
Wow.
And so, because it was just so beautiful, and I remember calling my sister, because I just wanted to know if she even really knew who they were. And so I said, hey, have you heard of Selah? And she was like, oh my gosh, they're my new favorite group. I'm obsessed with them. I read the inside of their CD covers and I want to be their friend. And then she stopped mid-thought, which is very strange. She knew something was off. And she said, why? Amy, why? Why? And I was like, why are you freaking out? She's like, I don't know. Why are you asking me if I know who they are? And I was like, well, and when I just said the word, the sister's leaving, she just was erupting. And it's very unlike my sister to be that way because she's very now here's the reality. You might not get the job.
Right.
And with this, it was you have to be in Selah. And so it was very exciting, but then it was terrifying because what if they don't like me? What if I'm not good enough? And for me, having dealt with weight issues my whole life and being told you won't get a record deal in Nashville until you lose weight, I was like, what if they tell me that they love me, but I have to lose 50 pounds? I don't know if I'm prepared for that. And so just coming in, it was just more, I think, just about the music, though. It was such beautiful music. And, the manager had sent me a list of a few songs to learn. And I'm like, I already learned all those already, So, yeah, and I grew up listening to hymns. My grandmother had been our worship leader at my church most of my life. And even as contemporary as we were getting and transitioning out of doing a lot of hymns, she always kept one hymn every Sunday, at least one hymn. And so most of them I was like, yeah, I grew up listening to these. And so I just remember after it was that first show was I'm in Selah for life. This is it forever. And I remember being shocked almost at the autograph line. Well, first, because I'm I've never signed autographs before, and people wanted it, even though I was this is my first show, and this is Nicole's picture, and I'm signing it. But I just remember being overwhelmed by what people would say as they stopped through the line, because it was every person would have a heartfelt story about Selah's music, or, teary-eyed, my father was passing away and we played your music, or I couldn't get out of bed in the morning, I was suffering from depression until I put Press On, and it was every person had this huge life event connected to a Selah song. And I just remember realizing this is more than just a singing group.
Yeah.
And this is more than just music. And I think it was finally the ministry that I felt my heart had been longing for. And so yeah, it was at first it was kind of this idea of I might join this group and maybe get a record deal out of it someday. And then it quickly became almost like a brother, sister. Our hearts share the same passion, because I think ultimately, even though they didn't plan to be a group, whenever we make a record or whenever we record anything, at the heart of it is we want encouragement. We want people to be blessed and encouraged by the music. And so as long as I think that stays our unified heart's cry, I think, I don't even remember your question now, but
No, praise the Lord,
I
you
just
answered it.
love
Let's
being
talk.
in this
I
group.
do think from a practical standpoint, for
Yes.
anyone who is auditioning, if you're thinking about joining a group, the things that separated Amy, because there were several women who had great voices. Amy's was obviously at a different level, but she came prepared. She knew the harmonies. She knew the different parts. She knew what her part was, and when I was coming in. And the way that we do sing is whereas with many worship teams, you may just be focusing out, in the audience, or you're worshiping. We do a lot of interaction, and so if you're not used to that, if you're joining a group, we'll look each other right in the eyes. And so in the auditions, I would do that, and it would freak the girls out. Like I would lean in and look at them when we were saying a particular word, and they might kind of back away, like, "What are you doing, freako?" And but when I did that with Amy, she just leaned right back in. And I have a really loud voice, and hers is so powerful, they had to turn me up. But she came in prepared. She knew what she was doing, even though she was scared to death. And so it was the thing where we came away from it, just seeing her heart and seeing how talented she was, and that seeing she could do both melody, she could do harmony, she could do leads, she could sing soft, she could do all of that. And so that is what really, we're like, yeah, she's the one that we need to choose. So.
Thank you guys for sharing that, Todd, especially there. So many of you and so many of us who are involved in worship ministry, we want to multiply our ministry, and we have dreams of maybe coming to Nashville or thinking about ways that God could use us more. And first of all, I love how you said it was 10 years before you were an overnight success.
Yes.
That's a good lesson for folks. And also to never take that ministry in your local church for granted, because God is using you there to touch lives in the same way
Absolutely.
He uses Selah out on the road. So thank you guys for sharing that story. Well, let's talk about the new record.
Yeah.
You Amaze Us, and the new single. This is absolutely incredible. Went to #1 on the Billboard charts. It debuted at #1,
Yeah.
well before the project even released. Tell us about what that was like and the song itself.
Wow, well, it was amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's been really just an incredible process as far as how everything has gone. And our A&R guy played us the song in the studio one night. We heard it one time. We're like, yep, we need to record that one. And it was written for a church in Florida called Celebration Church. They were dealing with a lot of different things. And so Jordan Malowski from the Afters, who's the drummer, is friends with Matt Adcox, who's one of the co-writers. And so they just started writing about the promises of God in spite of everything that was going on. So it was really written for the church. I mean, It was for that church and to encourage their members. And they recorded it as a church album.
Sure.
We heard it, just loved it, recorded it, and it debuted at #1 on Billboard, which is it's never happened for that chart. It's a record for that chart.
Wow.
And it's been #1 for 11 weeks, and it just probably will keep going like that. So.
Fantastic. Well, it's a fantastic song. If you haven't found it yet, it's one written for the church that you need to be using in worship. But the way you guys sing it, it just brings the message home. Absolutely amazing. I know you've got a lot of hymns on this project as well. Selah is known for revitalizing hymns, introducing them to the new generation. We talked about that a little bit earlier, and just bringing life and energy with the arrangements that you guys have, the passion with which you sing these great lyrics. And I understand that you guys got to meet Billy Graham recently and do some hymn singing for him. Tell me about that.
Yes, we got to spend an hour with him at his home, which was unbelievable.
Wow.
We've done some things with his daughter, Ann Graham Lotz, who
Sure.
is her father's daughter, as far as her gift of preaching and speaking, and just so we were at a ministers' conference to pour back into ministers, because so many times you as worship leaders and ministers, you are pouring out and you don't get refreshed. And we deal with that too with a lot of concerts. So it's always time to have that refreshing time. And so we were doing this concert to pour back in to you guys. And Ann had set up that conference for that. And so we had a break between, we did finish the conference, and then that night we were staying over to do a concert. And then we got to go that afternoon. She invited us. She didn't think we'd want to, that we just want to. She was like,
wow.
yeah, she was like, I thought you might be too tired and you want to rest. And we were like, we'll cancel the concert to go meet. She said, would you want to come up and meet Daddy and sing for him, for about an hour? And so we went up. It was about an hour long. And we sang, like, some of the songs we actually on the album is I'd Rather Have Jesus, which is one of his favorite songs. We recorded that specifically for him. And we sang some other of his favorite songs.
Just As I Am.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And he prayed. We just talked, chatted, and then when we were leaving, he prayed for us. And I tell you, it is humbling to have. I was sitting there thinking, this is Billy Graham.
Wow.
It's like, how did I end up in the home of Billy Graham?
Yeah.
And he prayed over us. Josiah hadn't been born yet, Amy's little boy. He prayed over Josiah. And he prayed specifically. He obviously knows what it's like to be traveling away from home, away from family, away from your church as you go to minister to others. So he prayed specifically for us to strengthen that on the road and safety. And the song Nearing Home, which is on our CD, I co-wrote that with our co-producer Jason Kyle, who was also there, and then another friend a few weeks later at this writing retreat, because that experience had just stayed with me. And Nearing Home just kind of goes through his life. And it's just a sweet little song. And we do it with mandolins, and it's real acoustic, kind of like to represent his mountain home.
That's awesome. Well, speaking of revitalized songs that I love, Soon and Very Soon, Andre Crouch. I tell you, that song is just amazing. And I know growing up as a missionary's kid in the Congo, Tim, tell us a little bit about that being able to take that song and breathe new life into it.
Yeah, I grew up on Andre Crouch. And for those of you who may not know him, he wrote Soon and Very Soon, I Don't Know Why, Through It All, The Blood Will Never Lose Its Power, and these are just great songs you need to go check out on iTunes.
Yeah.
There's a specific album called Live at Carnegie Hall that we used to play, and as missionaries, you're very isolated. You go out and you're on a mission station, typically by yourself, and there's so many times where just because of the cultural difference and because you're away from everything that you know back in the States, you feel all alone. And so we would play music and we would sing music, and that's what got us through so many times. So on these long trips, we just play Andre Crouch, and Soon and Very Soon was one of the songs that we would do, and we would actually perform it out there. And my dad wrote the lyrics in Kituba, which is the language I grew up speaking.
Wow.
So we added an extra verse on this one, and our producer kind of gave it more of a Caribbean feel. So it's kind of African meets Caribbean meets,
all right.
Cool.
It's a good combination.
That's very awesome. And one more song in the project I want to make sure we get to before we run out of time here, and that is We Must Not. I know you've done some work with the International Mission Board, and I know this particular tune Ed Cash had a hand in, but it's talking about the persecuted church and what's going on there. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I read a book called The Insanity of God, which was put out by B&H, which is part of LifeWay, and written by a missionary from the IMB named Nick Ripken, who spent 30 years in Africa and the Middle East. And after 6 years in Somalia, they didn't see one person come to faith. And his son had just died of asthma in Kenya. His mother-in-law passed away back here in the States. So they came back just devastated. And then these college kids, they were missionaries in residence at a Christian university in Kentucky. These students would come over and have dinner with them. And he said God just really used them to speak life into him and his wife. And they started thinking about, how do we train these younger people? Because we didn't know what we were doing when we were in a heavy area of persecution. Right, and in Somalia, they knew of 140 Christians when they got there. When they left 6 years later, there were 4 because the rest had been killed. And so they spent 15 years interviewing people and believers in Russia, in China, Middle East, all over, saying, just tell us your stories. You've lived through it. And not only have you seen the church survive, but you've seen it thrive. So we need to learn from you. And so this one story in particular that inspired We Must Not was he went to China and he started asking them, all these different questions. And finally this one Chinese pastor stopped him and he was like, hey, I want to ask you something. He said, I want to know, are there any believers in Jesus outside of China, or are we the only ones who believe in him? And Nick shared how, no, there are millions of believers all over, and there are millions who are in persecution just like you, fighting the fight. And they were so encouraged to know that, one, they weren't alone. That there were other believers who were going through the same thing. It gave them more courage to keep going. But two, that they weren't unrecognized, because they said one of the hardest things is not the suffering, but it's just believing that you're doing this on your own and nobody cares and nobody knows. And so for us, it was a thing of how can we get people involved and aware. And one of the things that one of the Chinese believers said when they found out we were praying for them, they said, tell people to pray this way. They said, when you pray for us, one, pray for our persecutors, that they come to know Jesus through our suffering. And two, don't pray that we'll be safe, and don't pray that we get out of prison. But you pray that we stay true to the name of Jesus, even if it costs us our lives, which flip-flops from how we usually do it. We usually pray, hey, do get them out of prison, and I would want to get prayed out of prison. But as we don't understand it all, but we know historically even that God is glorified through suffering and through persecution. And so the more it happens, the more the church grows. And so we need to pray that they stay true. And we can pray for their safety. That's totally fine. But we pray that they stay strong, even if it cost them their lives. And out of that, Ed Cash and I wrote, We Must Not.
Wow. It's a powerful, powerful song. You Amaze Us, just an incredible anthem. Listen, if our viewers want to find you guys, is it SelahOnline.com? Is that where they would go to find the dates? I know you've got some dates coming up with Mark Schultz.
Yes.
Coming up this fall. You've got a Christmas tour that you guys are going to be out doing. So you're going to be out, they're going to be out on the road. Please come see Selah. We thank you guys so much for being here with us today. Amy, Todd, and Allan, we thank you guys so much for joining us here at LifeWay Worship. And go to worshiplife.com and find out more about tools that can help you in your ministry. Thanks so much for being here today.
It is my victory.
nothing but the blood of Jesus.
Testing. Check 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Check 1.
Yeah. You got enough of that? Sounds
Check
good.
1. Check 2.